Well, hi, as promised, we are joined now by Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports and CBSSports.com and all those other various entities. Dennis, welcome. Thank you.
Randy, thanks for having me on again.
Nah, no problem. No problem at all. It's that time of the year that not that there's ever an off season for most forms of football these days. There's just a time where we're playing games and then the time that the news just hits just as regularly. Let's start off with a lot of coaching changes. You know, the 130-odd schools out there in this major college football seemed like about 20% of them changed coaches this year. How did that specifically affect recruiting to you?
Oh, gosh. Well, to the point that there are 27 coaching changes. By the way, it started with Chris Ash in September at Rutgers, and it lasted 148 days later. Carl Durrell got hired at Colorado. But I think the number of, specifically what your question, the number of schools that changed coaches after the first signing day were 5. And so there was a lot of talk about, hey, let these kids go wherever they want. They've already signed. And that's an unintended consequence of the early signing day. I talked to Greg Sankey at the SEC about that, and he kind of said, "I told you so."
Yeah.
I think 5's rather large, but we saw much upheaval. I mean, we just, last 3 years, Randy, 73 coaching changes with 70 schools. So 3 of those schools in the last 3 years changed coaches twice.
Man, that's crazy. That's great. And the whole thing with this early signing period was when it initially happened, it was going to be an opportunity for a lot of those kids that are going straight to college and foregoing that whole spring effect for their senior year in high school and are early enrollers. But now it seems like 90+% of recruiting classes are signed on that date, and the rest is kind of scraps after that.
Well, you could see it coming. The legislation was initially there to take pressure off. If you know where you're going, you can sign early. But typically of the coaching profession, they've told these kids, hey, you better get all in the boat now because that scholarship isn't going to be there the second time. And the same thing happened in basketball. So I think your number's right. I think about 90% of these guys sign in the early signing day because they want to, because they're told to, because they feel the pressure to. I'll use an example. USC only had 11 scholarships this year. I don't even know if they had a media availability on their second signing day. I think they announced 2 preferred walk-ons or something like that.
Yeah.
So the second signing day, the one in February that we all used to lose our minds over, is almost passes silently in the night.
Ah, that's crazy. That is nuts. Okay, so we talked a little bit about recruiting, a little bit about coaching. This time of the year, at least allegedly, it's going to be spring here eventually, and spring football sessions, which have already started. What are some of the major questions and major stories to you around spring ball?
Well, a lot. It starts to me in the SEC. Is this in fact an Alabama rebuild after not going to the playoff for the first time? Who's going to be the quarterback post Tua? I think they're going to be in great shape. They've got Mac Jones. They've got Bryce Young, the kid from the West Coast. And they've got Tua's brother, Talia. I think they're going to be okay whichever way they go. But that's a huge story. Then you get into the soap opera of Kirby Smart taking Scott Cochran, Alabama's strength coach. I've never seen so many words written in television minutes devoted to a strength coach changing jobs. But Scott Cochran wanted to be on the field so much as an assistant. He went to Georgia to be a special teams coach and took a pay cut. Everybody thought that Georgia outspent Alabama. No, he went there. And look, what's the story there? How many wins is Scott Cochran going to bring to Georgia next year? I would say it's probably 0. He's got to get his feet wet coaching football. So there's that. LSU is going to take a dive. They truly have a rebuild. They only have 12 starters back, losing Joe Burrow, both coordinators. But Joe Brady wasn't a coordinator, but effectively he was with Steve Ensminger.
Yeah.
And I think I've never seen, Randy, the SEC more competitive. I looked it up. In the SEC West alone, the 7 coaches in that division are responsible for, I think it's 5 national championships, 7 national championships, something like that. I forget the number now. And 11 head coaches out of the 14 in the league have at least been an assistant on a national championship team. You got Lane Kiffin, you got Mike Leach at Mississippi State. Now that changed the whole dynamic, excuse me, in that state, if not the entire division in the conference, because they're two pretty good coaches. We're not talking about slappies. And I mentioned all this. I didn't even get to Clemson, who's going to be preseason number 1. So they're going to be pretty good too.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued, I think, as most people are, just to watch from the outside and hope and pray that at least an extra day a week we can have press conferences coming out of Mississippi and Mississippi State.
Well, you've already seen, I don't know what Mike Leach is doing, but he's like tweeting philosophical stuff and retweeting stuff. It's just wacky stuff. It just makes no sense to anybody.
Gee, go figure.
And then, yeah, right. And then Lane the other day took a shot. It wasn't in bad taste. It was just kind of funny. Something about the coronavirus, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but he tagged Mike Leach on it, and like, here we go. This is going to go on every day.
Hey, a little bit on the draft and what's coming up here, April 25th when that starts. How do you think the whole quarterback situation will fall? I mean, obviously everyone agrees that Joe Burrow will be the first one, but is there any consensus from that point on when it comes to Herbert and Tua and everyone else? The one thing that kind of drives me a little bit nuts is all the craziness after the combine for Love out of Utah State.
Yeah.
That suddenly now that it's like people have discovered this guy plays the position, and like stats and performance be damned, he looked great in underwear.
Yeah, right, which is, part of the inherent problem sometimes with the combine, but he did look good. And maybe a poor man's Lamar Jackson, and even saying a poor man's Lamar Jackson is quite a mouthful. But yeah, there's some potential there. I think from the fact you saw Justin Herbert participate in the combine, he knows he has to move his stock up there. There are questions about his not his arm strength, certainly, about his accuracy. Tua, the medical reports now about Tua, if they are to be believed, are great. That the hip is going to be near 100%. He's going to have his pro day, which will be the biggest event in football since the Super Bowl on April 9th at Alabama, where everybody will be there to see it. It'll be televised, obviously, somewhere. And that comes a long way. I'll say this about Tua. He's maybe the greatest player in Alabama history. We can have that discussion. What I really liked about him is his candor throughout the 3 years he was at Alabama. At one point in December, he made a comment that kind of flew over everybody's head. It was something to the effect of, he was talking specifically about his hip, and he said, "The doctors say I may never be the same again." It was about a certain motion he made. And I'm saying, if I'm a scout or an NFL coach and I see that, those are red flags all over the place.
Oh,
but
yeah.
apparently he's beyond that. And we all know his mobility is the key to his game. Obviously that and his ability to make plays. But if he doesn't have that mobility he showed at Alabama, he's going to be in trouble.
His recovery aside, we all assume and hope for his sake it's 100% recovery and he's perfect physically. What are the warning signs, or what is the potential for his history of being hurt and missing time and going into that level of football? Because it is as great as the SEC West is, it is still a significant difference physically playing in the pros.
Oh, no question. I mean, you're going to get hit, and for mobile quarterbacks, running quarterbacks, what have you, you have to be smart. The Cam Newtons are outliers, guys that have lasted 10 years or more with the legs that they have. Marcus Mariota lost his job. He is very mobile. The NFL tends to take away your legs if you are a mobile quarterback. And by that, I mean the ability to run downfield. Joe Montana was pretty mobile in the pocket, but he wasn't a runner. But it takes away that mobility in general. So how does that, hit a guy like Tua? I'll say this, he comes along at the right time, Randy. I think you'll agree with this. In the NFL, they're looking for guys like that. We saw with Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, some others.
Yeah.
It's less about height, and Joe Burrow gets beat up for hand size. I think I'll take Joe Burrow any day of the week based on what he did, given where NFL offenses are headed.
Well, you've seen this. You've been around the college game for a long time. Isn't it remarkable the lack of condescension from the professional game now for so-called spread teams and the teams that have the either the run and shoot or the whatever your term is. Now it's being embraced on the pro level. And what do you know? Guys that start in the 7th grade doing 7-on-7 and are taught a specific way, if you just integrate it into your system on the professional level, they're going to be so much more effective when they get to the pro level. And it's remarkable to me that it took the NFL this long to figure that out.
Yeah, he used to call them gimmick offenses, look down their nose at it. And frankly, Chip Kelly just came along at the wrong time in the NFL. He didn't have the personnel with the Eagles or the 49ers, and those offenses hadn't hit yet. I think one of the most, this is not breaking news, but one of the most innovative coaches offensively, pro or college, is Andy Reid. He's running RPOs, sophisticated RPOs with Patrick Mahomes, mostly because he can. We know how good the personnel is and Patrick Mahomes is. But now that's all filtered up to the NFL. And for years, the college game was kind of that petri dish or percolator where all these ideas were born. And it's still there. It's going to get better. That's why Tua, again, and Joe Burrow have a chance to be big stars in the league.
Well, the great thing to me is seeing such a contrast in styles coming out of the college game, because for all the talk, like we're having this conversation about the various forms of passing games and RPOs and whatnot, you got a guy like Joe Burrow that's about as classic a NFL style quarterback as you could ask for, with his remarkable long to intermediate accuracy. That's something you just don't see that coming out of school anymore.
No, and all that goes back to what he did in those 2 years at LSU with Steve Ensminger and Joe Brady. And it really starts with Ed Orgeron committing to the spread and, the no huddle and what have you. 2 years ago, he was okay in 2018, I think almost 58% passer, but then it came within an eyelash in 2019 of setting the all-time accuracy record, 60 touchdowns, over 5,500 yards. That's Joe DiMaggio stuff. That may never happen again. That's 56-game hitting streak stuff. And you're right about his arm. The thing I liked most about seeing him live, and I kept telling people you can't appreciate him until you see him live, is his ability to see the field not only as a passer but as a runner. I just discussed how hard it is to run in the NFL, but he ran smart. He ran for the sticks. He took on guys when he had to take on guys. He slid when he had to slide. And all those things make a great quarterback. You put those in a package, you may have a great one.
Yeah, when you look at some of the guys out there, when we get done with this draft, is there potentially a bigger impact player than Chase Young?
No, to the point that I was talking to one of our draft guys on the site. And this is during the season when he was, he's going to win the Heisman. That was blowing up before he got suspended. And he said, I really think, he goes, in my opinion, the Bengals might be better off taking Chase Young because you can build around Chase Young easier and build a defense than you can, and stay with me on this, than Joe Burrow, who may be in a system that is, it doesn't fit him, or they have to fit him into it, and certainly doesn't have the personnel right now. So you got that, a couple of seasons where he gets beat up. I don't know how good their offensive line is. I don't think it's very good.
Not very would be the predominant answer.
Right. So you can build quicker, better with a guy like Chase Young. So I haven't seen a guy in college like him for the last decade. The Nebraska kid who's not still in the league. Now I just forget his name, but
Ndamukong Suh,
Ndamukong Suh. Sorry, The last time I saw a guy who affected the play on virtually every snap with his first step was Ndamukong Suh, and that's how Chase Young is.
What are you expecting out of Isaiah Simmons? I think for a lot of fans around the country, they really sort of saw his coming out in 2019, and when you read his sort of profile line, the size, and then on top of that 40 he ran at the combine.
Yeah.
I mean, he's cashing some serious bank right now.
Huge athlete. In fact, I live about 5 miles from him, right here in Kansas City. I went to his high school, talked to his parents when they were getting ready for the championship game. And yeah, he's I don't even know a prototype, but he's a freak. I think he played every position on defense except nose guard or interior defensive line, defensive end, slot corner, corner safety, obviously linebacker, ACC Defensive Player of the Year from the middle of Kansas. And you give that credit to Brent Venables, who is from here, who is from Kansas and knew about the kid and dropped in and saw him on film. And he said, these are the kind of guys that walk out of here. Never mind a raw freshman. These are the kind of guys that walk out of Clemson and go to the NFL when he saw film. But in that, what is he now? 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah, 6'4", 245. So
245. He added some weight this year, and just an absolute freak who can run. And you can put him anywhere on the field. I mean, he'll be more slotted, I guess, in the NFL. But why not? Safety one snap and rush linebacker the next. He literally can do that.
Wow. That's pretty incredible to me. I mean, I look at what's coming up though. When we start seeing polls, which won't be long now because everybody's got to have their poll, kind of like their draft orders and everything else. Who are going to be our top 5 when we get going?
Oh, it'll be Clemson. Will be number 1, probably Alabama 2. I'm sorry, Ohio State 2.
Yeah.
Alabama 3. I think you'll have to probably have Oklahoma somewhere in there in the top 5, because even though they're changing quarterbacks, the first time Lincoln Riley has had a quarterback he's recruited instead of gotten off the waiver wire as a transfer, so that's going to be a challenge. But and then maybe someone from the Pac-12. I mean, they've only been in 2 of the last 6. Yeah. I think Penn State's going to be really, really good. They might be top 5 with Ohio State. So. The same suspects. There's not going to be any surprises.
Out of the West Coast, is it UW or Utah, or do we throw SC somewhere in there in the top 10?
I think Oregon's head and shoulders right now the best program on the West Coast. Yeah, I think they'll be favored to win it again next year. Now they have to replace Justin Herbert, but they seem to be. They have a redshirt, I think, sophomore, junior who's ready to step in. And the reason why that's mitigated a little bit is that Mario Cristobal has built kind of an SEC mentality there where it's in both lines and then goes out. He's recruited big-time defensive linemen. Kayvon Thibodeau, the freshman from LA, had a great freshman year last year off the edge on defense. And, I think until further notice, they have to be taken down. Washington changes coaches. We'll see how that goes. They lose a quarterback. The thing about USC, and everybody wants to dump on Clay Helton, they might win the South this year. They might win the Pac-12 South.
Yeah,
they've got a quarterback and Caden Slovis. They've got receivers, and they are fully committed to the air raid. They may just outscore everybody and go 9-3 and win the South. Now, will that be enough to save Clay Helton's job? Again, that's one of the big questions and soap operas of the entire season. I went out there and visited Clay last month, and just to gauge the temperature, because frankly, I think with him, and I love the guy, I think it's untenable no matter what happens, because you've got boosters who are taking away their money. You've got fans that are in really an uproar. It's almost armed insurrection with these fans. They see themselves as, that this whole game has been framed around the playoff. Well, why can't we go to the playoff? We're USC. And then they see, obviously, Urban Meyer sitting out there. So I feel sorry for the guy in a way. But going back to your question, no, I think it's Oregon's to lose. Utah loses a bunch. They're not going to be in this in competition in the South, I don't think.
Yeah, well, I can tell you as a UCLA Bruin, I'd like to see Chip and company do something out there, but I'm not sure if there's much of a chance of them being more than kind of maybe a bowl team.
Yeah, and frankly, Chip hasn't recruited well to this point, which really says something. That's another thing about LA. USC had its worst recruiting class ever, and that means the internet era where they rank recruiting classes. For the first time, they did not sign a top 25 kid in California. And again, they only had 11 to sign, and Clay Helton went lineman heavy because he wanted to build They lost a lot of offensive linemen. So, that they're going to be lowly ranked because of that, because of the numbers. But it just, and then you throw in the fact that the top two quarterbacks on the West Coast, or at least in Southern California, DJ Ugalele from Bosco and Bryce Young went to Alabama and Clemson.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember that ever happening. These Southern teams reaching across the country and grabbing the best players on the West Coast.
Well, I really appreciate you joining me, Dennis. That's some great information. We only got about 6 months to go before we start counting down in the number of a short count for weeks to games.
I can't get here fast enough, can I, Randy?
It cannot. Absolutely. Dennis, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, man.